Welcome, welcome everyone to another episode of Walking with the Master. And I have an awesome privilege to talk to and to bring to you two beautiful brothers that are serious martial artists, but this is an opportunity for us to do some more good for our people and for our community and for those who are watching. Now, my name is Grandmaster Abdul Azziz Muhammad, formerly known and presently with many still known as Grandmaster Anthony Muhammad. I'm here, and why we're here and what this show is about is my tribute to Dr. Moses Powell. And my tribute to Dr. Moses Powell, we get an opportunity to walk with men who have walked with him and have studied under him. But as last week, we're going to do something that I'm being led to do, which is continue to walk with masters, even if they haven't walked with Doc. I have walked or have actually met other grandmasters that must be known by many and are known by many. But I want to do my best to spread this message to others. Now, who I have with me, these giants, and we're going to get a chance to learn more about them and about the man that we are here today to honor. And the one that we're looking to honor are their teacher, is their teacher, and that is Grandmaster Jimmy Jones. And he was and is a beautiful, beautiful brother. But these are two men that can tell you much more than I can. I felt his spirit while I've been in his presence, but they felt his hands, they felt his feet, they felt his heart. So I want to give you an opportunity to meet these two gentlemen here. We have Master Darrell Sims. Bush, my brother, how you doing?
Bush, I'm doing just fine, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And we have also another giant of a martial artist and a student of Grandmaster Jimmy Jones, Master Ted Love. How are you, my brother?
Greetings. Honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Man, great. Well, this is about honoring Grandmaster Jimmy Jones, who was, an incredible person. And I read some things about him. I have his book that I had gotten from him, and he's just a giant. He's a giant. So you all have your own. I know you as well, and you have created mountains yourself. So I want you to please give an opportunity for me to share in the life of Grandmaster Jimmy Jones. Tell me, where, in terms of yourselves, how did you meet him? First off, how did you meet him?
Master Sims.
Oh, okay. Grandmaster Muhammad, I was introduced to martial arts in the late 60s by a black belt by the name of Roderick Hawkins. And ironically, Roderick Hawkins was the student of Chuck McWaters, who was a fellow student with Grandmaster Jones. They both studied under John Kean, or Count Dante, as he was called. And just to show you how the creator works, or to make a long story short, Roderick Hawkins left the city. And for a good while, I was without an instructor. And as you know, during that time, loyalty was the rule of thumb, not an exception to the rule. So you didn't change instructors like you put on pants in the morning. So for some time, I was looking for an instructor, and I had become smitten by the art. My passion was fired up. I loved the art, and I wanted to continue. I wanted to enhance my training. So I ended up not knowing about Grandmaster Jones or his school. I just consequentially happened to see the school. I was taking the bus to my auntie's house, and I happened to see the sign, JJ School of Karate and Physical Fitness. I saw this, this hand in the form of a snake on the window. And it was just a very impressive window and billboard. And I happened to visit the school. And when I walked into the dojo, I thought I had died and went to martial arts heaven. Believe me, I mean, this was a state-of-the-art school. Mikawaris on the wall to toughen and develop your punch and strike, pulleys that had ankle straps. And the ankle straps had velvet on the inside, velvet on the inside or felt. And you could pull your kicks up and independently stretch yourself, front, back, side, however you choose. There were mirrors, there were weights, there was cardio equipment. I mean, it was a state-of-the-art school. It was a fitness center focused towards martial arts. And so it was basically history from there. I mean, I think I reached my greatest development in terms of my training as a karateka during that period. We were exposed to all kinds of icons in the martial arts during the period. Ron Van Cleef, Jim Kelly, attended some of the largest martial arts events during that period, and demonstrations. We had great instructors. You had Ben Peacock, who was the chief instructor. You had George Brockman. You had Vincent, who oversaw the Pee-wee karate students or demonstration team. And that team was amazing. I mean, they did all kinds of television demonstrations, and they traveled all over, and they were just as efficient as any adult that you saw. And during that time, we didn't have kids in class. There were adults took martial arts, and you have with you, one of the prodigies in that class today, Ted Love. And so he can tell you a little bit more about the Pee-wee demonstration team.
Well, Grandmaster Muhammad, answering your going back to your original question, how did I run into or meet Jimmy Jones? 1973, South Side of Chicago. Media attention. Every other TV show either had martial arts in it or was about martial arts exclusively. You're talking about a 7-year-old kid who was a paper boy for the Chicago Tribune, who would go up and down the street delivering papers. And one of my customers was Gwendolyn Brooks. And yes, that Gwendolyn Brooks.
Oh, yeah, right. That's
yes. In case you were wondering, I saw the wheels turning. Yes, it was
right.
The Gwendolyn Brooks. And I delivered the Tribune in those days, which at that time was called Chicago Today. And I saw a advertising page in the paper, and it says, "This black belt can be yours for $29.95. No options, no extras. Try JJ Karate LTD, 7600 South Cottage Grove. You will not regret it." Big guy with an afro holding a belt like this. So I would see bits and pieces about this school on 76 in Cottage Grove. Now remember, we're talking 1972, 73. There was a martial arts school on almost on every corner on the South Side. You had Shorty on 86th. You had Mr. Jones on 76. You had Raymond Cooper on 75th. You had Preston go around the corner on 63rd and Morgan, and there he was, we had all of these schools, and I was on a bicycle. So I had first run box office seats to see who was what when I looked through the window. First one was Ray Cooper. Second floor, I would go upstairs, too short to look over the desk, but I heard a booming voice. What do you want, kid? I looked over the top. It was this man dressed in a dashiki with a hat on. And this whole room looked like a basketball court without the paint stripes on the floor. Big old room. And everybody, the students were all male, 6'2", slim, and they all looked like Ray. Same beard and everything else. So I would watch these guys, and I'm thinking, you know, this is Kung Fu. He says, yes, it's Kung Fu. What did you think it was? I said, no, it's Kung Fu, sir. Yes, yes. So he says, you know something? You should go down the street. Well, who's down there? There's a karate school down the street. Maybe you should look in there and take a pic. What do you think? I said, I'll do that. Thank you, sir. So I got back on my bike and went down the street to this mysterious school on the corner with these weird looking animals painted in the window. But the windows were fogged up. So I had to go, and then next thing you know, I heard a sound. People grunting, sweating, bumping, all those types of things. I opened the door, instant sweat, like opening an oven, poof, heat, right? So I go in there, and there he was, Master Jimmy Jones. Somebody says, that's not Master Jimmy Jones, that's George Brockman. I thought George Brockman was Jimmy Jones. So I had to wait it out. I looked in the office window, and there it was. Obies, white, yellow, blue, green, purple, brown, and black on the wall. And right next to that Obie was a picture. I had to look closer, and there it was. Jimmy Jones and Bruce Lee. That was it. I had to be at this place if this man was associated with Kato, because that was what was popular on television at that time. So I was that typical early 70s kid, exposed to all the media, but I was fortunate to live 3 blocks away from that school and had people on my paper route who were martial arts fans, mainly Gwendolyn Brooks. So that's how I kind of ran into him by, you know, just by attrition, looking at other people. Then I was with Ray for a minute, and then Ray pointed me to that school up the street. And that's how I got introduced to Jimmy Jones.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love both of them. I mean, I need to get some of the straps to pull on for the legs and all of that. I need some of that now, and he had it back then. So that's awesome. Yeah. Well, let me ask, in terms of that master, that grandmaster, you know, and how he was, you know, tell me a little of his teaching method, you know, how was it different from in terms of the both of you, you know? So Master Sims, tell me, you know, what was it like for you?
Well, one of the things that impressed me is the fact that it was organized, structured. I mean, you had to know your dojo rules first. Rules that govern character in the dojo, how you walk, how you posture yourself in the dojo. You couldn't lean on walls, couldn't lay on the floor. He had manuals that you read and that you studied, just like as if you were in an academic school or a class where you had a particular discipline that you were studying. And we studied those manuals on a regular basis, and we were tested. One of the things that stood out, in my opinion, aside from him showing up on the dojo floor and exercising his signature sweep on us from time to time, and once he grabbed you, you were going down, no question about it, unless you found some way to get out of your gi, escape your gi or your uniform. But once he got his hands on you, you were going down. And one of the biggest things that I noticed that would stick with me for the rest of my life is that he would always emphasize and talk about the fact that he was not just training us to be good kickers, to be good competitors, you know, to go to tournaments, win tournaments, work for him. He said that he was training us to be instructors and mentors, to be able to share our knowledge and ability with others. And so I think if there's anything that, you know, we can gain, any one thing, that would be his passion to empower others. And I talk about that today, that our job as instructors is to empower others with our knowledge and ability.
Awesome, awesome. Same question, Master Love.
Yes. I did not have enough, being a young man at that time, again, maybe 7 or 8 years old, I had the unique privilege of meeting him at that age. And I got a chance to see how he handled other people's children. First of all, the children were not the only students in the class. The parents were too, because he advised them to have a seat in what he called the peanut gallery. And the peanut gallery was a row of seats off in the corner. And some parents would stay, some parents would go. But mainly when he put out an announcement that your children belong to me for 2 hours. Now, if you have anything to say about it, kindly have a seat over there. And they had a seat. So he would fashion the teaching to bring in the parents as well. So they got a sense of what was happening in the class. So when we all went home, the kids continued to hear the philosophy in the house, integrated with schoolwork, the importance of grades, the importance of eating right. All those things kind of integrated themselves into people's households. So he would deliberately do that. Now, again, being a child, you were enamored by what you saw and what you felt. I was a fast learner, faster than I thought. So right away, Mr. Jones would look for students who reminded him of himself. And if he saw a fast learner, he'd give you an assignment. You, come here. Yes, sir. I saw you work that cot over there. Yes, sir. That's not a compliment. Yes, sir. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go home. You're going to work that Sekanzuki. You're going to find yourself a tree. Do you understand? A tree. And you're going to work that Sekanzuki with the first 2 knuckles, straight down the middle, chambering and snapping back, and you're going to work it until you damage that bark. Do you understand? It's either going to be your hand or that bark. You pick which one. This is how he talked to us. So
and we're talking about the children right now, right?
We're talking about people my age, okay, beginners. We were in there less than a month. We were getting this, all right? We didn't know. We were pure and open. We didn't know we were getting the Marine Corps coming out of this man. So he was setting seeds early. We had nothing to compare it to, but receive him. And we took it literally. We didn't go home and talk about, was that a metaphor? What did he imply? It was nothing like that. He said, punch the tree. We went and punched the tree. The tree introduced us to the Maka War. The Maka War introduced us to the tree. Once we felt the shock going into our hands, now we had to condition the body to appropriate those hands. Now came the conditioning. Here come the push-ups, the sit-ups, the leg raises, all of this to prepare internal conditioning to meet the external whatever was coming. So conditioning became a below the waterline attribute that you had to develop, because in those days, it was all physical. Martial arts was physical. People hit, people got hit. We spent 6 months learning how to fall, learning how to roll. Why? Because Master Jones's original animal form was the tiger and the crane. So he had a way of grabbing you, snatching you, body checking you, and knocking both feet out from under you. So you would do one of these in midair and slam you into the ground. So he said, if you didn't equate yourself with the ground, you're going to have a hard time surviving. The ground is your friend. Why don't you meet him up close? So he made sure that we would have regular meetings with the carpet. So we didn't have time to process whether or not it was abuse, because that didn't exist in those days.
That's right.
So it was conditioning. And Master Muhammad, this is how I knew it worked. I got in trouble with my mom. I did something I hadn't been doing. I was gonna get a whooping. So she grabbed the belt. She said, "You're gonna do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it." And she hit me twice with that belt, and I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. Maybe I should have flinched to let her know that, you know, it hurts, but it didn't. I just kind of looked at her. And I said, "Mother, I'll never do that again." And she believed me. And at that point, she never tried to whoop me again. That's how I knew I was physically conditioned to the point where the strap would just bounce off and it had no effect. And she hit hard, but it had no effect. That's how I knew that place was the place I was supposed to be and that the conditioning was for real.
Man, that's beautiful. You know, and I think also about my time back then, you know, in the late 60s and the 70s, and coming up as a young fella. You know, I've told my students, listen, if I gave you what I got, none of you would be here. None of you would be here. But that was so beautiful. So when you look at times like it is now, where a child can call the police on you and you're just disciplining them, that could never happen once upon a time.
Absolutely.
You know, but that is
Absolutely.
a breaking down of society as well. Even though, you know, of course, that's not to take away, there is what is called abuse, and we don't want to lose that, but not just getting your butt beat. You, like you said, she beat you. It hurt, you know, when we were getting it back in them days. You know, listen, it was real, and it did take some conditioning to get that to be able to get through that. So that's a blessing.
Yeah.
And
I can add,
And
I can add quickly that Mr. Jones saw the gaps that were missing in karate as it evolved from the 60s. The teaching was much like show and tell. I show you the punch, you throw the punch, you got it. A lot of his training came down that line, complemented by tournaments, and promotions were established by how well you did in tournaments. So when Mr. Jones was promoted to Showdown, which took place in about 13 months, he was left with a sense of incompleteness. And during his Southtown years, he started working on that structure that we appreciated when JJ Karate opened in '72. Those are his formative years of putting that structure together. And that structure included, you know, instead of throwing a punch and being hit by a punch, I want you to develop an intelligence about what pain has taught you. Pain has got your attention. Your attention is gotten for a reason. Once we got your attention, here comes the wisdom. Why would I deprive you of your lesson in wisdom by not giving you the pain? So the pain became a registration to stand at attention and find out why you got hurt. And here comes the theory of power. Speed times mass equals power. The faster you move mass, the more power you can develop. Speed times mass equals power. The theory of ki, elimination of friction. Frightening the opponent adds more power to the punch. And then, as Master Sims recognized, the dojo rules: no gum in mat area, no smoking in mat area, no profanity in the dojo. So we had a moral base attached to the intelligence of whether or not we should implement this dynamic, exotic art that could design to end the fight. So here are these things falling into place all by themselves if you were sober enough in your training. If your training was intelligent, those are the building blocks that Master Jones could use on you and make your experience in being taught your own, as opposed to mimicking someone else. He had a good eye for recognizing individual talent and speaking to that talent in those terms.
Awesome. Awesome. Go ahead, please.
And let me say this, that, you know, as Master Love said, you know, you can use what the formula that Grandmaster Jones used in that school back then as a guide today, because you're right, we do have a large number of kids in our class. It seems like in our classes now, and it seems like our market is getting younger and younger. And one of the things that Ted alluded to was that he taught theory. Everybody, theory of friction, theory of ki, theory of power, theory of bone alignment. That was taught to everybody, whether you were adult or whether you were a child. So the key is to be able to teach those same fundamentals, as you were saying, to kids without losing the integrity of the art, but keeping in mind that they are kids. And so you need to approach it in a way that is conducive to their developmental ability. And that's what happened at JJ. That's the way things were taught at JJ. And so it was sort of, in a sense, it was like an experiment that could be used today in terms of the results that came out of that. These young kids were bright, extremely bright. And I used to call Ted the Doogie Howser of martial arts.
Yeah, I could buy that
one. He had a formula that we could certainly benefit from today. And I'll tell you, Ted was talking about the way he talks to you. I mean, he didn't necessarily talk to us like that as adults, but that same spirit was there because he was the catalyst for the tournament, the traditional warrior that we have every year. He sat Ted, myself, and Jeffrey Cricket Williams down and says, you guys ought to give a tournament. So it resonated. And that first year, he would visit my office, right? He'd always visit my office. I mean, he would do that periodically. And he would visit my office and he would say, I'm just stopping by. I was in the area, but he lived in the area, right? So, so quite naturally, you're in the area, He would say, where are your rules? You have your rules? So, you've got to be organized. You've got to be structured. You got to have your structure, and your promotions. You got your promotions. Darrell, you've got to have your promotions in place. You got to make sure it's professional, and your rules are your rules. I don't care who it is. If it's me, if you want me to wear a uniform, I'd wear a uniform. Whatever you want, your rules are your rules. Who are your peoples? He would. I've got an MBA in management, right? And he would compliment me on where I'm at today, but he would always, you got to be structured, you got to be professional. And he look you right, in the eye and tell you that, But he had a passion for the art, and he was always, and people may have thought that he didn't have current influence, but he did. He was always an example for us, and he didn't try to overwhelm. And when you come to the tournament, and I think you probably visited, he wouldn't try to promote himself in any way. He was always in the background, but when we needed him, aside from that, outside of the tournament, he was there to provide that advice.
Man.
As Grandmaster Muhammad, Master Sims alluded to a term, the Doogie Howser of martial arts.
Yes.
You can refer to Master Jones safely as the Dr. Frankenstein of the South Side, because he would pull selected students to the side and show us techniques that we would have to improvise and build on, and then come back and show it to him, and he would build on that. And the next thing you know, we were assigned to do demonstrations, and we would refer to those improvised routines that we just memorized. So when we would show up at the demonstration, he would talk to the crowd, and he would give us codified language, or he'd give us a look. For example, if he's talking to the crowd about the beginning of the martial arts and how accurate you must be in order to throw your kicks and punches, he would look at us and he'd give me a side glance, and he'd reach in his pocket and get a pencil. And while he's talking, he'd throw that pencil in the air. And that meant that whoever was closest to that pencil had to throw his fine side kick and hit it, pow, like that. So he had us on cue. And we were like maybe 10 or 11 years old, but we were able to produce those types of techniques. And then it just evolved into a question. We've had 12 students, let's make them all a team. And he would pack us in the back of that Buick Riviera with those plastic covers. You know, those early 70 plastic covers. It's like a sauna, right? Roll the windows up on purpose, right? So we could sweat and get warmed up. And we would do these demonstrations. I don't care if it was a picnic, it was in the lobby of Toys R Us, because he had to deal with Mattel toys. We were advertising G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, Action Jackson, Big Jim doll with the bulging bicep, and all of those things. He kept us busy in the public eye. And he impressed on us that when you are in the public eye, you're representing the art, you're representing the school, and you're representing me. So don't embarrass me. And we all believed that it was martial law waiting for us if we embarrassed that man. And we did not embarrass him, because our techniques had to have a standard. We had to maintain that standard. We had to be Minutemen when it came to production on the floor in front of people, and we had to improvise quick. So he was a great galvanizer of talent, and he knew what the public wanted to see. And that began to build more and more into larger venues that Master Sims could give us some light on, as far as what was happening from the tournament venue to a venue at the Erie Crown Theater in McCormick Place in front of 5,000 to 10,000 people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Demonstrations were very important because, and as you probably know, one of the things that I think, you know, we could learn from is how demonstrations, I mean, the quality of demonstrations in that day. Demonstrations weren't, I mean, the quality of tournaments. Tournaments weren't simply focused on competition and winning. Tournaments were educational. Tournaments were an extension of what we learned in the dojo. Tournaments provided demonstrations that would enlighten you to the power of martial arts. And we don't see a lot of that today. We don't see demonstrations. I know you do demonstrations. I see them on Facebook. I noticed that your demonstrations are a means of educating the public. And so that's what we did. That's what we did during demonstrations or during tournaments back then. And so the quality of tournaments mean an awful lot in terms of the value that they offer to our students. How can they leave a tournament better than they were when they left? Whether they were first place, second place, third place, or no place. You know, how do they learn from our tournaments? You know, so I think that's a very important aspect of what we did back then in terms of demonstrations and in terms of how we organized tournaments. Now, I think it would be remiss not to mention the fact that he was a very dedicated family man, and many of us may not realize that. I know Ted knows. I mean, you could see it when you visited him at home. You know, the family pictures talked about his sons, his daughter Jocelyn, and I think it's important that we mention too, because you don't see a lot of these things in public. But you know, when we have to go home, you know, that's many times our wellspring of support and our inspiration. His wife, Marion, she was a sound support for him throughout all of these years. and for us. And I just want to say that we thank her for being what he needed, what he needed, so he could be what we needed.
Yeah.
That was very important. And so even in his last few days, I mean, Ted and I went to visit him, and I noticed it was Sue. He wasn't talking very much, but two things that he did that let me know he was pretty sharp. He acknowledged that he knew who I was, and his daughter Jocelyn was talking about some of the songs that he liked and that were his best songs, and she played one of them, and he attempted to sing along with her, and that song was Family Reunion.
Mm.
So he was a family man throughout it all.
Yeah, you know, and it's important. You know, there are some schools out there that they are what would you call it, the McDonald's type of establishment, and it's about finances, you know. But then there are those schools that you know, the schools that are really beautiful schools, dedicated schools, when you see the relationship between, like all that you've been mentioning, it's so beautiful because it reminds me of my old school, you know, and what I try to keep going. And I'll just say this, one of my students who he hasn't been out in a while, and I gotten that he was coming back. I said, that's great. Now I can get in his business some more to make sure I can help him, you know, because it's about family, you know, and
that's right.
Not in a negative way. I'm talking just to be able to help him and mentor him and give him whatever it is that I have and that type of thing. So that's a beautiful thing. I just wanted to say that.
You know, this family, again, in the early 70s, when martial arts, especially karate, was just reaching its zenith in the media, and Master Jones was riding the traction of that movement, and he took advantage of media resources, and he got the word out about JJ Karate. And he had Ben Peacock, George Brockman, and John Vinson, who were the what I would call the proponents of vision. When I call proponents of vision, because Master Jones always had a plan or a goal that he was aspiring to for that class, and it would motivate us. One of the motivating factors for me was who would come in the door. Grandmaster, we saw people from mostly all walks of life coming in that door once or twice a week. We saw Ron come in there. We saw Jim Kelly come in there. We saw a couple of actors from TV. All these media types. Bill Curtis came in there. I didn't see him, I heard him. I was walking past the class and I heard something go, I'm Bill Curtis. I turned around and that was him. You heard all kinds of sounds coming out that room. And then I met Tim Weigel. He had all of these people that he could call that would get us instant media attention. And that was one of his talents as far as really asserting himself as a marketer. Now, the tournaments benefited from that, and he enjoyed a great tenure giving quality tournaments and giving crowded tournaments. But what he was heavy on was proper officiating. He didn't believe in favored schools or politics. Everybody had to go through a program to understand that the rules were on the same page. He even went as far as to try to push the idea of martial art judging being legislated. So you can actually have a training program like the Olympics have judges go to school just to be that, and they get paid for it. He wanted to bring that into the tournament realm. Absolutely. So these are the things that he was aspiring to as far as giving order to the Midwest. because he wanted martial arts on the map of national sports and headlines, so people from Japan can come over here, people from Okinawa can come over here. So if they had a tournament or a program, they would ask us to go over there. He was trying to open those portals of international activity, because he says, look, you have no business being a fifth or a sixth down unless you go international. You have to get exposure to see what the other people are doing, how they're training, or else you cannot say that you are a world champion. People say world champion. You hear it all the time. Go to a gym, fight over there 3 times, win grand champion, you're world champion. Go down there, fight over there in that gym. Join that organization. 50 organizations, 50 world champions. Too many organizations, too many world champions. So everything got saturated at some point. And when it gets saturated, the rules get softened, the standards get softened, everybody becomes money, money, money. And the next thing you know, the standards go out the window. It was a really big wave to be aware of. Sometimes he felt like he was outnumbered. But like you said earlier, when the 80s came around, things got saturated. Mech dojos started up, quality went under, and martial arts kind of went into a mode where it needed intensive care. I would say right now it's on a respirator with the way some of these tournaments are going. But he saw it coming. I think we all did. And that was one of the waves that happened, because in the late 60s, they were arguing about the same thing. Who was going to be in control? Who was going to give the best tournament? Who was going to make the most money? And unfortunately, as long as that money equation is in there, some people will let it dominate.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Right.
Now, you both. I mean, this is a conversation also about the man. The man, and it's all intertwined in that. Now, some of the more, I don't want to say lighter, but the family side, or the, that kind of thing. Sure. Talk to me about his heart. The heart of, I mean, because I know you have. I've been hearing his heart. That's why I'm smiling so much. It's beautiful. But what does that bring up in you when we're talking about, his heart?
He would often pull you to the side and just say, Teddy, what are your thoughts? What do you think? About what, Sensei? About anything. Tell me, where's your head right now? What are you after? What do you want? And I wasn't used to the simplicity and directness that he would just come out of left field with. And it just let me know he wanted to know your essence, so he could speak to that in such a way that you would become a legacy of total artistry. He wanted you to be so well-rounded that he would say, you're supposed to be better than me. You're supposed to have that drive. And oftentimes that's when he would become his most vulnerable, when he would talk about the things that affected him emotionally. He couldn't stand to see defenseless people get hurt. If he could defend them, he would. He says, if you see something happening on the street and that person is at a disadvantage, don't you walk by that. You do something on some measure, but you don't ignore and turn your head away. You're worse than the person who's doing the dirty work. He would try to initiate that thing and put it in our heads. And secondly, don't you dare contaminate the vessel. Drugs was prevalent around those times. He says, don't you dare touch that stuff. He would put that in our heads. But thirdly, if he wanted to show you who he was, he wouldn't tell you. He would go out in the backyard and throw a baseball. He would do things like that. I think of that right now, and I'm emotional about it, because That's the part that nobody saw. Everybody saw the great Master Jones mythology, but they never saw him flipping a hamburger. You know, they never saw him ask you, hey, top 5 gangster movies. You know, and why? I want to know why. You tell me why those movies work, you know, all those things. But he would come at you in those directions. And every time he did that, it showed you a different shade of who he was as a family man, as a philosopher, as a person who just simply cared. And if you were at a deficit, if you had problems like with money or something like that, he would talk to you about it. And without saying anything, he would just, no thank yous. He would just give it to you. And he was like that. You know, I've seen a lot of students, you know, have problems. And he evolved into that as he got older. That was some work for him to do. Because I remember in his younger days, in his formative years, he was dead on strict about the business aspect. But he began to realize as he got older, you know, some people need help and they need help now. So he did not hesitate to, you know, bend over backwards, see what he can do about helping somebody, but he would never say, he would never say advertise it. Don't tell them, don't tell anybody I did this or did that. He didn't desire that kind of attention.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Ted basically said it, but he had an appreciation for the value of family, and that appreciation for the value of family extended to his family of martial arts. I mean, and he used to talk about his dad owning, you know, a grocery store and how he learned, you know, business through his dad. So it started with his dad and his mom, and it continued, you know, to his family, his nucleus, and that was represented in how he would address his martial arts family. I mean, he was always interested in seeing us excel. And as Ted said, he didn't have to be out front leading the charge. Like Ted said, he got to the point, it was nothing for him to invite you over to his house and to sit on the patio and talk to him about what's going on, you know, and in your life, as well as how, you know, that affected your teaching or what you were doing in the martial arts. And so he would come by my school and he would just sit and watch. And you know how it is. It's hard for you not to get involved when you're sitting before a class. But you know, if he got involved,
that's right.
It represented his heart. Like you said, he'd find the kid that was having the most challenging problem or issue, and he would want to address that. He would want to do what he could to correct it. And again, you know, he was very supportive of us and what we did. I mean, it was, and if he felt that there was more that we could do to make a difference, you know, he wanted to call us over to his house individually or collectively, I mean, whichever the situation merited. And he would talk to us about that issue. And if something came up that he heard about and he felt that there was the wrong representation of how he felt, and he would call and says, I heard about this. You know, how did that come about? Well, I just want to, let's get together and talk about this. And so, you know, his heart was big. His heart was big, bigger than the average person. And, you know, I think about the saying, something I read says that great people are ordinary people that do extraordinary things.
Yes, beautiful.
And that's an accurate interpretation of Grandmaster Jones.
let me ask about the book, that he finally got out, and he had been writing it for 30 years. I mean, you know, what can you all, what kind of conversations have you had with him about that? Because it's something to leave a piece of work when so many people pass on. They leave no work, they leave people, but the piece of work can last, you know, for many years, and younger persons can look at it and learn from it because he put himself. I would believe 30 years you are in it. you the essence of you and how you teach and why, because that's one of the things I looked at on the advertisement, you know, that he did about the book. You know, and he was talking about how he was talking about the explanation of teaching the technique and what you're going to learn from the idea of the technique, and so much, you know, he was saying about that. So tell me, you know, some of what you've gotten about him doing the book, and maybe that he has said to you about the book itself. Either of you could, yeah.
Well, I'll just say
Go ahead,
that
son.
that I wasn't available to be involved in the preparation of that book. I did some promotions for the book, Ted and I, and some of Cricket, Jeffrey Cricket Williams. And Ted could tell you a little more about the preparation and the development of the book because he was involved in that. But I will say this, that the book was a compilation, and quite naturally, you certainly can't put the experiences that we had in the dojo in that book. I mean, it's just too broad, too intricate. But that book, Give and Take, is a compilation of many of the things that we did and lessons that we had at JJ. That I think that was his attempt to fashion that into something that he could share, you know, with the community at large.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah. The book was one of the, I guess, one of the signposts, if not one of the milestones of our relationship. At the time, I was in the latter part of my tenure as an English professor, and I had edited textbooks, and that was part of my job as a professor. Sometimes you have to edit other people's work as well as your own, and I was pretty good at it. And he decided to say, well, Teddy, I want to do a book. I don't fancy myself an author, but it's been sitting in the back of my head for a long time. And Billy Hinton, rest his soul, was part of the main idea or the main motivation for Master Jones going after that, because Billy himself had written a book called Men of Steel Discipline. And it was a compilation of interviews. People like George Harris, James Cheatham, James Fielding, Ray Cooper, and Mr. Jones himself were also in that book. So it kind of lit a second fire for Mr. Jones, because it was now a chance for him to perfect the original research he had done right after he was promoted to Shodan, when he was putting together the workbook that was the guide for JJ Karate back in '72. So he already had a template to work from as far as the technical parts, the explanation of technique, but he wanted to bring it full cycle in terms of whatever experience that he had gained after 1972 and whatever theories that matured over that time. I was brought in as the research man and the clearance man. Whatever he wrote up, I was the one who was responsible for making it publishable or changing the language to make it that way. So I was there almost every day. I mean, I would go to work and I would go to his house and work from 8 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning. This went on, you know, off and on for 3 years because he typed with one finger.
Yeah, they showed him in there. They showed him in
You see him doing
That's
that?
right. That's
He
right.
was not exaggerating, okay? So he had all these things in his head, and he would write it out in advance, then he would type it up, then he'd get an idea, go off script, and then write something else in there. And this went back and forth for a long time. And I was the one that had to try to keep him on track. So the editing turned into pictorials. Now we needed somebody to demonstrate the techniques in pictures. And then I became part of that, and we brought Jeffrey in. So it was one of those projects where you were involved on every side. But as I look at it now, you know, it was definitely a cornerstone of Mr. Jones being a product of his times, the things that he felt was on his mind that was important to him in his formative years when he dealt with Robert Trias, John Keane, this crazy idea of developing his own style. And what would that be composed of? And how would he put that together? And the same sweat that went into putting the universal karate system together, he still had residual energy to finally put it in written word. And we all found out that translating from experience to the written word is one heck of a journey, because you are lucky if you can get 70% of what's in your head on the written page. And we went through those growing pains of developing the written word. And I would often say to Sensei, I said, look, Sensei, this smells like a series, because compilations have ingredients, and you can pull out one element of it, expand on that. You got another addition to this. This could go. And he says, well, you take it, or one of you guys take up on that. He would always hand it over, you know, tell me what you make up. So that book was, I would say, the chia seeds. If you want to water them, see what they give you, and you build on that. Hence the term universal. It wasn't just martial art. Technically, it was a way of thinking and how to expound on ideas and put your signature on it and go from there. So he knew what he was doing as far as laying out his legacy, laying out his thoughts about the art, and making sure that that was understood from a basic point of view to a Shodan point of view. Anybody could read that book. One of the challenges was, how do we write it for the average person who didn't know martial arts to read that book and pull something out of it?
That's right.
Man.
And
Oh, go ahead. No, please.
I'll take it a little further. You know, Ted is absolutely right. It was to try to reach the average individual, but there are some black belts that could look at that book. You can't just take those hymnos, the hymno yata katas, and work them if you are not familiar with them. If you have not learned those katas, to be able to read it from that book. And they did a tremendous job of illustrating. We would be remiss not to say that Sensei Peacock was a part of that process. Sensei Ben Peacock, in terms of the illustrations and whatever input, you know, he could provide from his perspective. But one of the videos that I saw when you interviewed Thierry Cassell, that video is one of the promotions that we all put together, and it's extended. I think you had a portion of that video where he was typing, but it's an extended video if you could ever get your hand in, and then there's interviews with us and us demonstrating various aspects of the system. But that Ted is, They had a tremendous, it was a tremendous experience for them. And I was on the outside looking in, but I've heard many of the stories.
Now you mentioned the Hymnos, Grandmaster Muhammad. I know you've seen those hymnos off and on in tournaments over the years, and what was the mythology surrounding those katas? That was Mr. Jones's thesis on stepping out of the katas that were aligned with traditional Shorei Goju, which is what he was teaching at the time. And when he was when he reached fourth dan, he had this interesting idea. What if we created our own forms based on the 5 animal forms of dragon, tiger, leopard, snake, and crane? Well, to do that, you're going to have to look into the Chinese background if you're going to talk about the animal forms. So he had to bring in people who were versed in that area. And here comes Mr. Cassell. So Mr. Cassell, Mr. Peacock, and Mr. Jones were the think tank for how to devise these moves. Now, at the time, people were not working katas that contained broken rhythm, oblique moves, reverse motion moves, 360 spin in midair, gymnastic moves, forward flips, and all those kinds of things. So how can we justify this being legitimate karate technique while at the same time expanding and challenging our colleagues to embrace certain techniques that were not part of the traditional Shorei Goju lexicon? So it forced us to step up our conditioning, open our minds, and really begin to appreciate different arts like White Crane Gung Fu, Hungar Gung Fu, which in my research, the Hymnos had a lot of influence from those 2 Gung Fu forms translated into bits and pieces of Okinawa Tei and Shorei Goju. So he had enough techniques in those forms to give due respect to Shorei Goju, but he also implemented some odd and exotic moves taking from different arts. And it was challenging for us to make that a mix. And they distilled it down to 5 separate hymno kata forms. And it spoke to Ben Peacock's attributes because he was the main salesman in the tournaments for those katas. That's how they got popularized. But it was a challenge for other people to learn those forms. And it was so much a challenge that people began to dilute the forms and water down the forms to see if they could work in themselves, which was kind of a compliment to us. But at the same time, this is how people dealt with something that was pretty much more challenging or probably larger than their experience. So those katas resonated far beyond their original intentions. You know, it created a movement. And to this day, we still see people out there trying to replicate those forms.
They're hybrid katas. They're hybrid katas, as Ted said. They're not your traditional karate katas, which is amazing. And they still gain traction today, as Ted said. You know, I go around the country and believe me, you know, I ask about Chicago. What do people know about Chicago? Grandmaster Jones' name is mentioned all the time. If they don't remember anybody else, they remember him.
Yes. Well, you know, I'm you know, this has been great for me. It's been great for me. I mean, I've gotten an opportunity to really meet him even better. And I know now that I'm not going to allow myself to not be in touch with you all and to share and get you to share more, because it's just important that especially our people in particular, you know, Black martial artists should have and know others like themselves, but it's beyond even that. It is
Absolutely.
for martial arts in particular to be able to have and know men like that, because we're losing the icons of the martial arts. So many of them,
Absolutely.
and we need to, continue to keep them alive and make them relevant, because they are. But you've heard the adage, out of sight, out of mind. It becomes our responsibility to expand and expose,
Absolutely.
our loved ones who taught us, because we did have a dojo family. I mean, you know, they were our dojo fathers and whatnot. I mean, my father, and I mean, it was just, he knew that when I was there, I'm good. I mean, he didn't worry. My mother didn't worry about me being in the dojo all the time. Didn't worry,
Mhm.
and it's hard today to think about a child and not be concerned. That's why so many, they bring them, they leave them, they pick them up and they go, but you don't find the little children walking anymore from the dojo and leaving, getting on buses, the little ones like that. So, but anyway, I'm just saying that this is wonderful. I appreciate all that you have shared, and I will not end this appreciation. And I'm going to be knocking on your doors, to so that we can get together and be together more. And please share what you'd like to share to the audience, which is a broad audience. There are some that are from out there in other countries and whatnot, and they listen to this show. So share what you'd like to share at this time as we are closing out, what you'd like to share to this audience.
Well, I
Well,
just go on, Ted.
well, I just like to say that if you study and practice something for the last 50 years, you must like it. There's something about it that you just enjoy being around it, and you look up and can you admit to yourself that you didn't find the martial arts found you.
Yes.
And that's okay to admit. It's okay to be smitten. It's okay to be irreversibly smitten. I would say that because, martial arts is always on my mind in one area or another. I saw it on the breakfast table. I saw it in the playground. Whatever you were doing, you could relate the principles to some area of the art. And that is what was missing so much, the principles and the underlying philosophies that speak to life itself. That you must make your personal pursuit. Nobody can teach you that. You have to go through something. You have to close the door behind you and pull down the shades, and you work until something happens, and you stay with it until there's a difference. Sometimes you have to allow that thing to sanitize you, to clean you up, to detox you, and you come out a different person. Do not be afraid of that process. That you must put your signature on and do it for yourself. Take a look at history closely. Every martial artist who's ever been what we consider great has gone on a personal journey, and they came back different. They came back glowing. Something they put their signature on. You can go from Peter Urban to Ron Van Cleef to James Cheatham to Ray Cooper. These guys were signature martial artists. They left, they closed the door, they spent 40 days and 40 nights, and they came back and they were different. So if you want transformation instead of confirmation or conformity, close the door, cut off all the nonsense, turn off that TV, put the phone down. Nobody wants to find you that badly, and believe me, you don't want to be located that badly. Turn the phone off. Spend some time with your work, perfect your work, and they will call you a craftsman, not just a technician.
Awesome.
what I'll add to that is that martial arts has been for me. I started as a teenager, 69 now. It's been the very thing that has allowed me to rise above the negative influences in my environment as a young Black man. And when you look at our society today, and you look at the discipline issues, the violence, the drug abuse, the hopelessness, the fact that our young folks are committing suicide, something I never thought about as a young guy, a young kid. I mean, I was just trying to, find out how I could be the best that I could be. Martial arts can be the vehicle that empowers our young folks to be all that they can be. It's a human development tool, and that's something that Ron Van Cleef said when I was talking to him one day at a demonstration. He says it's a human development tool, and that's exactly what it is. And so I would just say that it's important for us as martial artists to reach beyond the dojos and become a part of, intricate part of the broader society in our efforts to promote who we are and what we do. And at the same time, I would say to the broader community that martial arts can be the key to many of the issues, many of the social issues that we find in our society today. It's truly a development tool that can empower us to seek out the best that we could be.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, family out there, you've heard it from two of the offspring of Grandmaster Jimmy Jones. You hear their expression and deliverance of who he was. And in seeing that, you can see who they are at this time. So I have to bow to Grandmaster Jimmy Jones by just looking at you all, his lineage. And there are others that have come up under him, and and I pray that they are as impacted, and I'm sure they are, because they have continued as well. So I thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. So now, since you've come to the house, I want you to know that you can now go into the refrigerator yourself. You don't have to ask anymore. You're not a guest. As I've told others, you are now.
That might be dangerous, sir. Ted has a heck of an appetite.
Well, Grandmaster Muhammad, I like to add that many times we saw these demonstrations with this guy who would just come out of the audience and get in front of his class who had the uniforms on. He would point to them and they would roll out and stand there, and then they would go right into their routines. But this guy always had this suit on, right? So I asked Master Jones, I said, who's the guy in the suit with the bow tie that never seems to move? I said, really? His suit doesn't even wrinkle either. Look how he's throwing these guys and everything. So we would go back and forth on this suit. So we would go, is that wool? Is that linen? Is that silk? What is that? We need to know what that is. Is that gabardine? So I say, I don't know what gabardine is. Well, you need to find out what that is. Is that shark skin? I never heard of shark skin. We would go back and forth. What kind of suit is this guy wearing? But in spite of that, the way this martial artist would throw people, he would go up underneath them, around them, under them, over them. With one hand, one arm, he would control their entire body, change circles, half circles, quarter turns, broken rhythms, and send them where he wanted to send them. Who had such mastery of the physics of the human body where he can manipulate a person like that? And I look at that, and I look at Moses Powell, and I look at Professor Vassillon, I look at all these people who were pioneers of that type of technology. And I never thought I would meet someone face to face who captured the essence of those kind of movements that were recorded some 40, 50 years ago. I even see Ron Taganashi moved. I looked at all of them guys from the East Coast and saw how they worked. But this gentleman encapsulated all those things. And on top of it, he was articulate. So I have to say that the one I'm talking to right now is the one that I'm referring to. I was a big fan of you. I didn't know how to reach you. You were surrounded by all these technicians. I couldn't get up close to you. I remember you were on 79th Street one time. I think, was it Ashland? I'm not sure. You were over there for a minute. And I remember the history of 79th and Ashland because John Keum was upstairs across the street back in 1963 with Chicago Judo and Karate right up there.
That's
and
right.
across with you guys. So I had a lot of chances to see real jujitsu at work, and I understood it when I saw you work it, Sensei. So I have to say that you're one of those signposts of truth and artistry.
Absolutely.
You know, you can't fake what you were doing. Either you knew it below the waterline or you didn't. And you, Master Sims, you have to admit, this guy, he made people walking down the street stop and look in the window. It was that magnetic. You know,
amazing.
He brings to mind these people, you know?
And he hasn't broken his stride at this date, this point in life.
Yeah.
He continues to do amazing things.
I appreciate his sense of wonder. You know, when I said, Grandmaster Muhammad, did you know that Sammo Hung was in Enter the Dragon? He went, what? Was that him? He turned on his head. What, is that him? I didn't know that. He was doing that. I said, this guy, he's a big teenager, just like all of us. Really? I didn't know that. So that was fun to see that just jump out of you like that.
Yes,
that was fun to see.
And I love him too.
Yeah.
But man, thank you all. Thank you. I'm not good at receiving. You know, I'm real good at giving. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is what it is, Sensei.
Well,
so, you know, it's a pleasure really to not meet you, but to have you on the show and to have you. And both of you, I look up to, and I've looked at your commitment to the art, your love for your teacher, and I just wanted to do something that will continue to honor him. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and we really appreciate you allowing us to share our message.
Thank you. Us, my brothers. All right, everybody. Once again, you've been on another episode of Walking with the Master, and you walked with two. So let's appreciate, pass on, let them know what's going on. And again, thank you all for being here with us. Us.
Thank you.
Every student of a master here today, you reflect your master teacher. You want to walk like him. You want to talk like her. But you start by having an object in front of you that you admire.